Hey everyone, Camber here, showing you how to use your camera to make good videos. And getting a new camera is always really exciting, but it can also be a bit overwhelming once you start sifting through all the menus, trying to figure out which settings that you should use for video. So I'm going to give you a little shortcut by showing you what settings I use on the Sony a7C to help get you on your way towards making more cinematic videos. So we're going to turn the camera on and look right through all the menu settings. I'll explain all the things that need explaining. It's not going to be exciting, but you'll see what my cinematic settings are. So starting out, a lot of this is grayed out because we are in video mode, but when I do take pictures, I use raw video, but it defaults to JPEG, so I change it to uncompressed. Then we have large, file size, aspect ratio 16:9 because I usually use this for thumbnails for videos. Then APS-C Super 35, basically with this, you can punch in to make it like an APS-C type camera, so you basically get an extra 50% out of your lens by doing that if you choose to. Long exposure noise reduction is off, as well as high ISO noise reduction, because I don't want the camera doing any of that processing for me. If I need to do noise reduction, I'll do it myself in post. For lens compensation, I leave it all to auto so that the camera can compensate for the lens. Then we have interval shooting functions. This is so if you're doing time lapses or stuff like that. And then for memory settings, you go in here and you can set these memory settings up. For example, right now for my normal video mode, I have 4K 24 frames per second, and I have programmed slot number 1 to do 60 frames per second, 125 on the shutter speed, and all the other settings as well with Kelvin, aperture, ISO. I can switch to 2, and then that's set to 120 frames per second with 1/250th on the shutter speed. So I have all my shutter speeds set based on the 180-degree rule, and then I switch back to 4K. So that makes it really easy for me to switch back and forth between modes. And you also have all these extra 4 modes. So say maybe you had slow motion indoors with the Kelvin already set, and the aperture and ISO, slow motion outdoors, all those things. You can get really in depth if you already know what all your lighting is going to be like, so you're ready to go for quick changes. Next up, focus mode. Continuous autofocus is what I like to use. Most of the time we have balanced emphasis on these. Focus area set to wide. You have a limit here. I just leave them all checked. I rarely change from wide though, so it doesn't really matter to me. Have this set to off. Autofocus illuminator off. Have these settings here: on, human, auto for the eyes, on and on. Then tracking sensitivity is 3 standard. If I need to change it, if something's moving fast, I can, but that works most of the time. Have that set to standard as well. This is on, pre-autofocus is off. Autofocus area registration off. Focus frame color is white, so the box that shows up around people's faces is white. You can change that if you want to red. Autofocus area clear is off, and I like to display the continuous autofocus area, so when those boxes do pop up, I know that it is locked onto that thing for sure. That's set to don't circulate. Autofocus frame move amount standard, and you can micro adjust your autofocus if needed, but I have never had the need to do that. All my lenses have worked well with the camera. For exposure, I have ISO is going to be set on whatever your current setting is. Metering mode, I typically only use spot and multimetering, and then face priority and multimetering I leave off because I don't want it giving more weight to someone's face if I'm in the multimetering mode, because I will just use spot if I need to make sure they're exposed how I want. And I leave the spot metering point to the middle. Exposure step, I like 3rd steps on the exposure. This is set to auto. Then flash does not matter when it comes to video. White balance, I typically always have it set to Kelvin, as you can see there. And you can even fine tune it here if you need with all the red, green, and blue. Then priority set and auto white balance. I rarely use auto, so I just have it set to standard. Now right now I have picture profile set to 8. So I'll show you what that is real quick. I use Cine 4 for the gamma rather than S-Log 2 or 3. If I'm doing something professional, I'm going to be playing, I'll do that. It is a little bit more difficult to grade, but I use Cine 4 for most of my stuff I do for YouTube. Here are all the other settings I use for picture profile 8. But if I was to turn that off, you would see that these come available here. I leave this in the auto high dynamic range off because I don't want it processing my video like that. Once again, creative style standard, but I don't use that since I do like to have picture profile 8 for my color grading. Then leave that off. Focus magnifier, you click on that, it punches in ×4. And I have no limit to that. This is for focusing when you're doing pictures. It does 5.9. Autofocus and focus magnification is on because I want the autofocus to keep working even when I'm punching in to check the focus. Then manual focus assist is off. Peaking setting I have set to off right now. I'm actually going to turn that on. And then high and red, I leave that on because you don't see it when you're in autofocus, but when I switch to manual, it'll automatically show me my peaking in red. And you can change that to a different color. Say you have a lot of red roses and you can't see what it's focusing on, you could change based on your situation. And I flicker shooting, that's off. Face register priority. You could turn that on and register a face. For example, say you're shooting a wedding, you want to register the bride's face. So when she's walking down the aisle, once it sees her face and locks on her, it'll stay on her and will ignore all the other faces that it's seeing in the audience. Next up, we have the movie mode. So manual exposure, always shooting in manual. Forget these auto modes. Manual is the way to go. And then I have file format is 4K. You also have HD option there. And then we have 24p at 100 megabits per second. You see there's two options for all these. I always shoot at the higher one because this is going to retain more data and give you higher quality, though it will take up more space. But if we were to switch to HD, then you have all these options as well with multiple megabit rates depending on how much space you have. Slow and quick, I don't use it all because as I showed you, I have my own custom mode set because I want to control my frame rates and when the videos are slowed down in post. Proxy recording I have off, but this basically records a lower res version of whatever you're recording to go along with your high res version. So when you're editing, you can just edit the low res stuff, do all your editing tricks, processing, color grading, effects, all that good stuff, and then just apply that all to the higher res video after you're done. It may take a while to render, but the editing process is a lot quicker. Autofocus transition speed is 5. Subject shift sensitivity is to 4. That changes based on your situation and what's going on, so I don't always leave it there. Auto slow shutter is off. This doesn't apply when you're in manual, but if you're in some kind of auto mode like aperture, it would prioritize lowering your shutter rather than raising your ISO when it needs more light. But what happens then is changing the shutter speed in video will change your motion blur, which you don't want. So I just leave it off. Initial focus magnification is ×4. We saw earlier when you punch in to check your focus. Audio recording is on. The level is going to depend on your microphone and what you need. I have audio level display is on. Timing is live. Wind noise reduction I want off. Once again, I don't want it doing that stuff for me. Marker display, right now it's off. If I turn it on, you'll see these lines here. The white lines there, that's a 2:35:1 ratio, or also known as 21:9. So if you plan on cropping in later or changing your aspect ratio, you can frame your stuff within that box so that you know what you want is in the picture. In the settings here, you can see 2:35:1. There's lots of other options, or you can turn it off. But that's what I use when I'm planning on doing a different aspect ratio. Video light mode, power link, I don't have any, so it doesn't matter. Movie with shutter is off. We have silent shooting off, release without lens enabled, then disable. Steady shot is on. In the steady shot settings right now it's auto, but if you went into manual, you could go in here and change the millimeter that it's stabilizing for. For example, if you had 200 set but you had a 35mm lens, the stabilization wouldn't work well. All the lenses I use are compatible with auto, so I don't need that, but if you had lenses that the camera didn't recognize, then you could do it that way and make sure you have the best stabilization for it. Then we have zoom. I like to put on clear image zoom here. If you had optical, it would only let you zoom with what your lens can do if you have a zoom lens. Digital allows you to punch in further, but that's when it starts to get grainy and look bad. But clear image zoom allows you to punch in 50% more on your image with almost no loss in quality. So I put it on there so I have the option if I need it. So display button, you go in here and you can pick what you want on your display options. I like to take the histogram off, but you can put everything on that you would like there. So basically, when you're here, that's everything, then almost nothing. Then I have my level and audio, and then everything once again. Then finder monitor, that's basically auto switching. When it senses you, the screen turns off. That can be a pain at times if you don't want it switching, but once you pull the screen out, that won't happen. So when I'm recording, I usually have the screen pulled out to the side anyway, so I can angle it how I want. So that's not an issue. Plus, if you had it on manual, then you would have to program a button so that you can switch easily between them. And there's not a lot of custom buttons, so I don't want to waste one on that. That's set to standard. Zebra setting I have off right now, but when it's on, it's set to 100+. So anything that's at the top exposure level or above, it's going to show zebras so I know what's overexposed in the image. And I have that set to a custom button. Grid line, I always use the rule of thirds grid. Exposure set guide is off. That's not displayed. Auto review is off. And then custom keys, I'll show you what I use here. So number 1 right here, I have set for white balance. Number 2, the little trash can down here is set to peaking display, so I can turn that focus peaking on and off. Number 3 is the button in the middle. It's have for my metering mode, going between spot and multi-metering. Number 4 on the left side is audio record level, so I can change my sound levels quickly. Number 5 is follow custom because the ISO is right there, so I just click on that and then the wheel turns into ISO dial. Number 6 is the marker display, so I can click that and that 21:9 overlay pops up and goes away when I want it to. The movie shooting button is up top, and then you can choose if you have a lens with a button what you want to do. I don't have it set because I don't have any lenses with that button. And then you have the function menu set. These are my settings. I only have them set customized for the video settings because I rarely use pictures aside from just taking some thumbnails for my videos. But I have APS-C Super 35 on so that I can easily change to Super 35. So essentially you could crop in 50% more of that, and then if you were using the clear image zoom, crop in another 50% from that. So this option gives you a lot of range on your lenses. Then here we have steady shot, and then the focal length adjust if I'm using a different type of lens that doesn't recognize, peaking, zebras, focus mode, picture profiles, gamma assist, so that it basically puts a LUT over top of my picture profile so it's not washed out, and it shows me what the image could look like if I graded it that way, and gives a more realistic image. Touch operation on and off, the autofocus transition and subject shift sensitivity speeds, and then the marker display. A lot of these are some of the custom buttons I already have, but if I was handing the camera to someone else and they didn't know what I had the custom button set to, they could easily click the function and still access most of the things that you need. So for dial wheel setup, right here we have aperture, down here we have shutter speed, and then you click ISO and then it turns into a ISO wheel. And then the rotation direction is normal for both of these. Have EV compensation off for the dials. Function of the touch operation, touch focus, which basically I touch something, it focuses and stays on that. Touch something else, it'll rack focus to various objects, which is what I use most, but there's also the option of touch tracking. So say a car or whatever was driving by or coming near me, I could click the car, and as it drives closer, it's gonna stay locked onto that object. Dial wheel lock is set to unlock, so basically during recording I can change aperture, ISO, shutter speed if I want, though chances are I probably won't, but I like to have the option to do that. Audio signals are off. And then here, I don't really do anything in this network settings except turn airplane mode on and turn Bluetooth off, because I don't want it searching for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signals all the time and wasting battery. Same with playback, I don't really do anything with this. But here in the setup mode, for monitor brightness, I turn all the way up, as well as the viewfinder brightness, because I want to see the best possible picture I can. I'll leave the color temperature to 0. I currently have HLG set for my Gamma Display Assist, which is the LUT that gives me a preview of what my picture profile could look like since it is a washed out image. Volume settings is based on how loud you want it playing back. Delete confirm, I just have this, so if I click delete, one less button push. Display quality is high. Now if you first get your camera and it looks like it's not necessarily grainy but not quite crisp, it's probably because it's set to standard. You go to high, it's going to give you the best quality. It will use more battery, but I like to see the best possible quality. Power save start time, I put on 5 minutes because 30 is kind of long, and if I forget about my camera sitting there, I do want it to save battery. Auto power off temp. Now this is important. I put it to high. I've never had one of these cameras overheat, but if it does start to get hot, if you're in a really hot environment, this will just give you a little bit of extra time. It'll push the camera as far as it can go before shutting off to save the camera. NTSC, that's your 24, 60, 120 frames per second. If you switch to PAL, then that'll give you the 25 and 50 frames per second options. Touch operation I have on. I have this set to touch panel only. And then the settings, I have absolute position wherever you touch, and then over the whole screen. HDMI settings, this is all going to change based on what kind of system you're using. USB connection I have set for mass storage. Once again, all these things depends on where you are and what you want for your camera. You have the format, which is grayed out right now because I don't have an SD card in here. And that's everything there. The last thing is the My Menu settings. So I really like this on the camera. As you saw, there are a ton of menu options. So this allows you to customize the things that you use the most that you don't have on custom buttons. So the first thing I put is format, so I can quickly format my memory cards. Then I have the recording setting and the file format. And then this touch focus and tracking, I can switch quickly between those like we talked about earlier. Custom keys, if I want to change any of those. Same thing with the memory settings of the control dial up top. Then we have picture profiles I can quickly change here, as well as LUT options. Then we have the marker display once again with the various marker options here, or if you want to use any kind of safety zone or guide frame. Steady shot with its settings there, and then interval shooting, so if I want to do time lapses. And that is it for my cinematic settings for my A7C camera. And I want to make it very clear that there is a lot more that goes into making a video look cinematic than just the camera settings. However, this is the first step to getting you in the right direction. But I have a lot of videos and playlists on the channel teaching techniques to help you make the video on your camera look more cinematic, so be sure to check those out, and it'll help you get even further on that road to making great videos. But if this video is helpful, then please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and check out all the videos and playlists. There's a lot of good stuff that will help you learn. And with that, I will see you in the next one.